I do think Hikaru is going to win because Levon is down to just 4 seconds on the clock, and there's multiple pawns. Look at these bishops. The bishops are just amazing working together. These bishops can try to help the pawn go down and become a new queen. And Aronian with just 4 seconds left, I cannot imagine he somehow manages to survive. Look at this pressure as well. Hikaru attacking on both fronts, getting his rook back into a defensive position afterwards, now taking the rook and the checkmate to end the game. A master class in how to deal with time scramble, and also a master class in tricky captures and tactics. And wow, this was just the game of the match thus far.
Hello everyone and welcome to this SEC quarterfinal. Hikaru taking on none other than Levon Aronian, and here to take you all through all the action, myself, Fiona Steil-Anthony, and I'm delighted to be joined by Grandmaster John Ludwig Hammer, who's actually making his debut here on this channel. John Ludwig, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm really looking forward to these games that just got underway. Hikaru with the white pieces, he's kind of playing the Nimso Indian defense with the white pieces, because here the way white has played with putting the bishop up, exchanging that bishop for a knight, and then bringing their own knight into the middle of the game, that is a standard play for black in the Nimso Indian opening, but here Hikaru is playing it with white, and it's actually even more dangerous now because he has those extra moves since he got to start out the game.
The Nimso Indian has a reputation for being a very solid opening. Here, do you think the fact that Hikaru is playing with the white pieces, he has that extra tempo, do you feel it makes a difference?
It's a solid opening, but you can win games with solid openings as well. And what I'm noting in particular is this bishop white has that's pointed down towards the black king. Even though the opening has a solid reputation, it can also be used by attacking players. And Hikaru, given the opportunity, he can really get to showcase some of his attacking skills as well.
Yeah, meanwhile, we see Levon take some ground on the queen side with those pawns, which have advanced to b5, c5, d5. There's a lot of tension going on there between the pawns. In general, which pawn breaks do you think white has to look out for? Which pawn breaks does black want to go for, if any at all?
It's a good question. I think that the main way for black to create trouble is to push this pawn forward in the middle, because that would stop the influence of this very good bishop Hikaru has pointing down towards the black king. And now Hikaru is really showcasing his intentions to go for an attacking win to start off this quarterfinal, because by pushing his rook up, this rook is going to move over and find its place, pointing down towards that black king yet again. And with both the bishop and the rook pointing in that same direction, this is going to get really scary for Aronian pretty soon.
Absolutely. I have a few questions actually for you regarding what you think Hikaru's strategy will be for this match, but I just want to acknowledge a couple of subs in the chat. So thank you so much, guys, for the support early on. This, I think, is Hikaru's most challenging matchup yet in the SCC to date. And I mean, absolutely no disrespect to the opponents he has played so far. But Levon, you know, it's been a long time world number 2, absolute elite player. So thank you so much, Sayonara, Foom, and I'm missing some others, but we very much appreciate the support. So yeah, John Ludwig, let me ask you, as D4 has just appeared on the board, what do you think Hikaru's overall strategy will be for this match?
Hikaru is just he's so dominant in internet blitz chess, and he's just gonna want to play his game. He wants to create trouble for the opponent, create difficult decisions to deal with, But right now, it's Hikaru facing a difficult decision. Because as we talked about, this pawn break, the pawn moving up in the center, this has both blocked off that beautiful bishop we saw pointing down towards the black king, but also it has opened up an attack from the bishop towards the white rook. Now, I was saying earlier that the plan for Hikaru was to move this rook over and have it pointing down towards the black king. In that regard, nothing has changed. He can still do that. However, that will be faced with some ideas Black has of using this square in the middle now that a black pawn is no longer occupying it. And Hikaru, he does decide to make a trade here. And now I'm expecting him to actually just capture this pawn in the center, trying to say to Aronian that, well, you're offering me a free pawn. I'm putting pressure on this one with both my pawn and my bishop. I'm just going to take it and leave it to you to justify this sacrifice.
And we're going to see if Hikaru is going to do just that. I'm always curious, to see how do these players justify such a sacrifice. First of all, we'll see, does Levon even recapture at all? Maybe there are other possibilities to deviate immediately. And if he does recapture, will Hikaru take on d4? Do you feel it's a pawn you would be comfortable taking in a blitz time control?
Well, at this point, Hikaru is already committed. If he wanted not to win a pawn here, he should have pushed his pawn forward in the center and tried to launch his own attack of the pawns on the king side. Having now captured in the center, Hikaru is saying, okay, I'm willing to play on your terms. I'm going to allow you to make this pawn sacrifice, but I am going to take that pawn and make you justify your reasoning for giving me this freebie. And here, Aronian with his knight, using that square, the black pawn left, the knight now putting pressure on white's pawn. Together with the bishop. And this is a really, really tense game. And to start off today, for the first hour and a half, we're going to have 5-minute games where each player gets an additional second per move made. And despite only having played 16 moves so far, both players are down below 2 minutes. So I think this is going to be a time scramble to decide the first one.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I feel in general, time scrambles, the faster the time control gets, the more that will favor Hikaru. I'm probably going to botch it. I'm very bad at remembering pros, but I think Hikaru said something recently that if he gets into the bullet portion with no more than a 2-point deficit, and correct me, chat or mods, if I'm misremembering, but I think what he said is if he has no more than a 2-point deficit, he is quite confident he can beat anyone in the world in the bullet portion still. So he's very, very confident. And we are now entering almost bullet territory here. As bishop b4, and I see a gaping hole on c3. What else is there going on in this position?
Well, I think right now the main thing is that the white bishop has been blockaded by its own pawn on d4. Hikaru is up a pawn, but he's really struggling with the activity of his pieces, his bishop being massively restricted by this pawn. Also, the black knight in the center is incredibly well placed. Hikaru would desperately like to push his pawn forward to kick that knight out, but in response, Levon is just putting everything he has to put pressure on this white pawn. And Hikaru, despite being a pawn up, is under some pressure right now. And he's down to just 30 seconds on the clock. Hikaru is incredible at the fast-paced games, but he is now in trouble, having to face some incredible play from Aronian. Aronian sacrificed a pawn early on and really just has kept on the pressure ever since.
Yeah, and it feels like this is a position that Hikaru would probably rather play as black. Queen a5, we see the engine did not really approve of that move, and it seems to be because of Hikaru's response a3.
Yeah, a3, excellent move, trying to kick out this black bishop. I'm guessing this bishop will now retreat itself closer to the black king, but making that decision is time consuming for Aronian, and both players now below 1 minute on the clock, and Hikaru pushing further up with his pawns. Hikaru now has 2 pawns controlling this c5 square, which means he can safely put his knight there on the next move, and this knight will limit the options of black's rooks.
Is there any way black can stop us from planting that knight? Doesn't look like it, right?
No, and now Aronian is... Oh, actually, maybe I spoke too soon. Aronian is trying to attack the pawn that was securing this location on c5 for Hikaru's knight. Hikaru feels forced to take that one out. Aronian taking back... and now Hikaru starting the attack on the opposite flank with both players down to just 13 seconds.
And 1 second increment is really... almost nothing. It's good enough in the end if you have a completely winning position, but to play such a rich position with just 1 second increment, I feel it's really favoring Hikaru now. Somehow the tide has turned completely.
Yeah, and look at this. Hikaru is sacrificing back the pawn he received early on.
Is Levon gonna flag? He flagged.
Yeah, and the reason Levon flagged is how Hikaru was able to open up for his bishop. We were talking early on in the game that this bishop was a problem, but once it managed to get activated, that was just the end of it for Aronian. Aronian just collapsed immediately after Hikaru got that bishop back into play.
Wow, so we're gonna try and open, well, here is the second game. Let's just flip the board. And what do we have? Levon playing an English opening. Let's maybe very quickly go back to the beginning. Just click through the first few moves.
Yeah, so an English opening from Levon. Hikaru bringing the knights out early, as is Levon. This is known as the 4 knights variation of the English opening, obviously, because all the knights got involved before the rest of the pieces. Aronian then taking a bit of a cautious approach with his pawn in the center, allowing Hikaru to get the bishop out, pointed down towards that white king, and both players are getting their pieces into play. Hikaru here very early on, asking for that trade of knights, and does get that trade confirmed. And it's an interesting position here with lots of pieces still on the board. And lots to fight for, which I guess is essentially what Hikaru is looking for. He wants to have combative games.
John Ludwig, would you agree that the first game was sort of a warning, that Levon had to take that as a warning? Getting into those extreme time scrambles against Hikaru is probably not a road he wants to go down.
I mean, for any player, being low on time is a big problem. But there's a special psychology playing against Hikaru, because everyone knows if you get low on time against him, that's probably going to be the end of it. That being said, I thought it was an excellent game by Aronian. Yeah. I thought Aronian was putting some massive pressure on Hikaru, even with the black pieces. So if it was a shot from anyone, I would say it was a shot from Aronian, showing that he's not going to be a pushover in this match, and that he can sacrifice pawns in the opening and actually force Hikaru to be down on 20 seconds on the clock. Because even though Aronian ended up losing the game, at some point Hikaru had 20 seconds left, and the computer didn't really like his position that much. So I thought it was a really interesting play from Aronian.
Speaking of getting low on time, Levon just spent an incredibly long amount of time for this blitz control on rook b1. What do you think that was about? What was he considering?
Well, chess is a difficult game, so you often want to spend a lot of time. It's clear what his intentions behind the move is, though. He wants to push his pawn forward, but he needed the rook in support of that. As for the time management, we'll see if that works out for him. I suspect, as you do as well, that if he keeps spending that much time on opening decisions, this is not going to go Aronian's way.
Of course, I mean, it's the start of the match. For those of you who are maybe just tuning in now, this is only game 2. Hikaru just won game 1. As John Ludwig was just saying, a very exciting game. Do you feel like, what is your experience at the start of the match? Do you feel it sometimes takes the players a little bit just to get into the groove of things, adapt to these time controls?
For me, when I play tournaments, I always consider the first round the most difficult one, because then you're kind of getting into your game mode. And so in a match, when there's only 2 players, it means that it would be, if you start falling behind from the start, that's going to be a massive problem. So the person who first kind of adjusts to the time control and the situation will probably have the upper hand. And here I gotta say, I really like Hikaru's play, the way he's gained control of the central areas of the board, putting his pawns next to each other. That's when they're the most effective, because when they are next to each other, they control both the light squares and the dark squares, and they're kind of creating a barrier for White's pieces.
Not just that, I completely agree with you. Love Hikaru's center, but look at the clock times here. Levon is down to only 1.5 minutes. Hikaru still has almost 4 minutes. That's a huge time difference. Already Levon is still thinking here. He's going to have to speed up. What should White do? Should White try and attack the pawn center immediately? Try and improve the pieces? What's the approach here?
Well, I think the time situation is based on Aronian not liking his position. And this is something we will often see, that a player who's uncomfortable will spend a lot of time trying to find a situation, a move, where they feel like they got everything under control. And so I think Aronian's time usage here is a symptom of him not being happy with the position. And here I'm really intrigued by the decision Hikaru has to make. Because
I think so is he, by the way, because on the camera we just saw him looking at the ceiling when E4 appeared on the board.
Yeah, it was a difficult choice to make, and frankly, I'm surprised by his aggressive approach. He pushed his pawn forward in the center, but that means that Aronian now has been allowed to put his knight on a great square in the middle of the board. And basically what Hikaru is claiming is that this knight is currently extremely well placed, but it's not actually really attacking anything. And Hikaru is going to choose the strategy here called playing around the piece. Hikaru is basically just going to put his bishop here in front of the knight, making sure that the knight has nowhere good to move. And then Hikaru will start pushing his pawns up towards that white king. Very interesting strategic play right now.
I guess some players might have been tempted as White to capture the bishop on e7, get rid of Hikaru's bishop pair, but I guess the problem with that is just because of those nice pawns on e5 and d4, is that Hikaru has more space and also a better grip on a square like c3. Was that the problem?
Well, if it was a problem, then Aronian now decided that it wasn't anymore. Yeah. I think the main reasoning was that in that situation, the white bishop would be blocked by its own pawn, whereas the black bishop would be a very nice addition to these central pawns. When Aronian decided to go for this regardless, it's because he saw that he could then afterwards force the trade and trade away that bad bishop.
Once again, there was a pawn hanging on b4. Well, maybe it's too late to go back now. We'll see if there comes another chance to take that. how do you go on about this? If I'm black, I'm always tempted to just take one move to play h6, g6, make some air for my king, and we see that's what Hikaru does.
Grandmaster thinking right there. But on the other hand, Aronian now preparing the move h5, also now pointing down on this pawn. This white rook is actually very well placed, trying to control two black pawns at the same time, forcing Hikaru to make a defensive stance with his pieces. Aronian now down to 20 seconds. It would be surprising, I think, if Aronian managed to defend this with so little time. But he's doing a good job of it, and he's putting pressure on Hikaru on multiple fronts, which is what you have to do in situations like this.
b4 has dropped now, though. It happened so fast that we barely saw it happen, but h5 Hikaru just took, and rook d5. So I don't know if there was an oversight or if Levon just gave up the pawn to get some kind of play on the king side, but it seems like it's just a pawn here, John Ludwig.
Yeah, but to be honest, that pawn could have been captured earlier in the game as well. So it was always a pawn that was in trouble, and there was a struggle whether or not there would be an appropriate moment to actually capture it. Hikaru has done so, and now has a pawn lead going into the time scramble, but the computer is not at all convinced that this is a winning situation for black. It's saying it's rather equal, despite the extra pawn for Hikaru, which leaves some food for thought. Like, you would think there's some trouble brewing in the position, with the computer not being more optimistic than it currently is.
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised, but Hikaru is taking his time here as well. The time has almost evened up now. Hikaru down to 25 seconds. King h6, that's not a move I was expecting, John Ludwig.
He's really going for it here, Hikaru. He's trying to capture another pawn, and now Hikaru is down below 20 seconds himself. Hikaru realizing he's kind of losing grip of the situation, going for the trade of queens. Trade of queens has been accepted. Then Hikaru now pointing his rooks, both rooks working together towards the pawn on f2. That pawn is going to be a crucial thing to capture, because now there's checkmating ideas for the white king, and the computer is suddenly saying that this is a winning situation for Hikaru. The big question is, can he give a checkmate to white's king? Hikaru decides not to go for the checkmate and instead starts gobbling up white pawns, and here the white pawns are just captured one after the other. And because Hikaru has his king being able to support that last remaining pawn, he is able to win the game with two extra pawns. So
the players are so moving so fast that I think the games are coming in by pairs. That's because they are playing so fast. But it looks like Hikaru has shown great technique, and that d pawn is just running up the board. It's now become a queen.
Yeah, but actually, maybe this was a mistake on Hikaru's part, because winning with a queen against a rook is actually not as easy as you would think. However, for a human, defending this perfectly is almost impossible. And Hikaru manages to get a really nice position that is known to be a winning situation. The way he forced white's king into the corner, this is actually way more tricky an endgame than you would think, but it's
I will never forget. I think it was Morozevich who failed to win this. Either Morozevich or Yakovenko, but it was these two facing off. And okay, I don't know if Levon lost on time again. Surely he wouldn't resign unless there's a forced loss. My feeling is Levon lost again. And yeah, as you were saying, this endgame, certainly not easy, but 2-0, what a start. For Hikaru, both games though were incredibly competitive, very interesting stuff. But my feeling is, I don't know about you, that Levon cannot afford to spend quite as much time as he did. Of course, that's easier said than done. I understand that, but that he cannot afford to spend quite as much time in the opening and middle game.
Yeah, we'll see if he tries to adjust that strategy now going into game 3. And Hikaru has actually played the orangutan opening, also known as the Polish opening. He pushed his pawn.
Do you think it could be a mouse slip, or do you think he intended b4?
No, he definitely played this on purpose. And one of the benefits of Hikaru's strategy is that he now has an extra pawn in the middle of the board, while Aronian has a pawn on the side of the board. So Hikaru is now going to try to exploit the fact that he has these 4 pawns that can work together against these 3 pawns for black. And already his position is looking quite good, having both those fianchettoed bishops, a bishop on the side of the board, pointing down in towards the middle. Those bishops are just looking amazing right here, trying to have that pressure in towards the center. And if I'm Hikaru now, I would move my rook to the side and just continue trying to push these guys up in the middle of the board.
I mean, I'm just so impressed every time, and John Ludwig, the openings are probably my weakest point in chess. I know very little about openings, and I thought tonight maybe will be a good opportunity when John Ludwig here with me. We'll see so many games. Hikaru plays all these systems with b3. Okay, here it was b4, and I always... First, I'm not really sure what they called. I never know. I'm never sure about the nuances, but it's just magic in his hands. I mean, he always just plays this b3. So often I see, out of the opening, the engine gives black a small edge, and then, a few moves later, he just turns it around. And I feel it's especially helpful in fast time control to have a system that doesn't involve so many long theoretical lines, but that you're just so familiar with.
Yeah, and to some extent, it's not really a system either. I think a lot of his play is improvisation, because it's really just helpful getting the opponent away from the lines they studied. And there's another top player who is pretty fond of this strategy, and that's Magnus Carlsen. And Hikaru and Magnus are two of the few people in chess who can confidently state, like, I can play any opening and I'm still going to put lots of pressure on you and make your life difficult. And so Hikaru is choosing this strategy to avoid the opponent's preparation, and he wants to play a game because he knows that on a level playing field, he can take down anyone.
Speaking of, one final question before we get back to this game. During game 1, and the action is happening so fast, during game 1, someone in the chat was asking a question to you, John Ludwig. Do you think it will be Christopher against Sven in the final of the SCC? And now we'll test your... It's a little bit of a trivia.
Yeah, no, I must say I was delighted the first time I discovered that Magnus's legal because that is in Norwegian circles considered a very old-fashioned kind of boring-ish name. My apologies to all Svens out there. But yes, now the recent discovery is that Hikaru has a unknown first name as well. So Christopher versus Sven, aka Hikaru versus Magnus. It is the final we're all wanting to see. Yeah. But the question is, will we be able to see it here? Because look at this play from Levon Aronian with the black pieces. He is putting the pressure on Hikaru. And here there was a situation where Hikaru's queen was forced to move into that same diagonal where the black bishop was already pointing. This allowed Aronian to start making captures. And as a result of these captures, there's an attack on both bishops at the same time. One bishop retreats, attacks the rook. And here, Hikaru is down a rook in trade for a bishop. Hikaru is going to have to struggle for a draw here as as Levon shows that even after having lost the first 2 games, he's come to put up a fight and make it difficult for Hikaru.
Absolutely. It feels like, luckily, the bishop we do have for the rook is quite a monster bishop on that long diagonal. Knight d3, where do we want to capture on c6 with the rook, or do we just want to hit the knight, make that move first? How do we decide?
Really difficult choice, but I'm gonna say that the expertise that is Hikaru Nakamura probably is gonna make the right choice, or rather, whatever choice he makes is the right one. So if Hikaru had used his rook to capture the black pawn, then odds are that the white rook would have been traded off, and that would make black's conversion to a win much easier. Because here, now Hikaru can use that rook he kept, and he can start trying to make threats on black's position. Here, coming up with the rook, pointing in towards the knight. The knight has to move. Maybe we can take this pawn. Maybe we can take this other pawn. Okay, Hikaru now going for the rook trade. Because now the rook trade is not possible. If the rooks are traded, the knight will come up and attack both the pawn and the black rook.
And you cannot defend it.
Yeah.
Because d5 was covered, and if rook a8, I think, sorry, I cut across, but what you're getting at is if the rook goes to a8, there was a discovery check with knight e7. Very nice.
Which is why I'm surprised Hikaru is going for the trade even so. Oh, he's still going after this pawn on a5. That's excellent. And if this pawn moves forward to try and save itself, Hikaru will have the double attack, the nasty fork attacking both black's king and the black rook. And so Hikaru has now accomplished what was supposed to be extremely difficult. He has managed to eliminate all of Aronian's pawns on the left side of the board, which means Hikaru can now focus his defensive efforts on this side where the kings reside. And that's going to be much easier for him to defend because he has a smaller part of the board where he needs to keep his attention. It would have been much more difficult if he also had to deal with a black pawn out here on the side.
Absolutely. This a-pawn will fall sooner or later. Of course, Hikaru will try and hold on to it for as long as possible, but I think it will fall. And then the question is, can he hold? What do you think? Objectively, is it winning for black, or do you think it's objectively a draw? It's one of these positions that's very tough to evaluate, I guess.
There's absolutely no doubt in my mind, by securing that black pawn on the side of the board, Hikaru has managed to get this position into drawing territory. I think he's going to save this game. And I don't really see much Levon can do to stop it. I think this is 100% safe for Hikaru. And I'm going to say that there's even some chances for Hikaru to win. Because Aronian being frustrated with wasting a good chance to get an important win here, he might get into time trouble and land himself in trouble.
Yeah, there is a way. Of course, there is a chance Levon could overpress also. I mean, as you tick down, right now Levon still has 50 seconds on the clock, which is plenty, but as the seconds tick down, knights are just such tricky beasts. And I mean, who hasn't fallen, for the odd fork once or twice? Nobody is safe from them. Not the best players in the world. Nobody is. So for sure, Levon, he will try to make progress here, but he has to keep his guard up.
They say in 1 minute chess, the knight is just more valuable than the bishop. And it's because it's so unpredictable in time trouble. And time trouble is precisely the kind of area we are going to right now. Hikaru is jumping around with his knight. He's trying to place his knight so that the knight controls these squares to avoid the black king from entering into the heart of White's position. However, Levon is not giving up, and Levon is managing to put his king all the way down on the other side of the board. And this is, maybe I was overestimating how easy it was for Hikaru to make a draw, because here he is in some proper trouble. There's nothing Hikaru can do to prevent this black king from infiltrating, and this king is just going to keep moving along this, trying to get in behind White's pawns.
Super impressive to me how, how smooth Levon made it look, running all the way across the board with his king. I guess the question becomes, how do we make progress? Is our plan, is Levon's plan to go for the pawn on h4 somehow from behind, or what?
I guess right now he's going for this pawn. This is the only unprotected pawn in Hikaru's position. But now both players are down to less than 10 seconds on the clock, which means they're going to have to play really, really fast, which also means that this knight is going to be able to jump around and cause all that sort of trouble we were talking about earlier. The evaluation bar is firmly in Levon's territory, but never discount the knight from being able to jump around. And here Hikaru is trying to eliminate all of these black pawns as quickly as possible. Levon manages to hold on to this pawn in the middle. That pawn is going to try to become a new queen. However, in the meantime, these white pawns are trying to go up and become new queens themselves. And really good play here from Levon. He realizes that getting the king involved quickly is the only way to move forward. And as this pawn moves up, trying to become a new queen, Levon is just in time to stop it. And it even finishes with a checkmate. The rook and king working beautifully together to make this a 2-1 scoreline. And with the fourth game just starting immediately, there's no rest in this speed chess format.
Absolutely. And we don't get to see checkmate very often. I mean, all the games so far, no draws, 3 games in, 0 draws, all decisive. And the players not holding anything back. All the games were incredibly fighting. All of them were very long. They went down to the final seconds. And I think we're really in for a treat here tonight.
Yeah, it was such an important win for Aronian to make sure that he just didn't collapse after the poor start with 2 consecutive losses. And also getting that win with the black pieces is so important for confidence, because that shows everyone, yourself included, that you can go for the win regardless of whether you're white or black. Of course, that same thing applies for Hikaru, who now has the black pieces. But Hikaru temporarily with a small advantage here, because white has 2 pawns on the same row, the so-called doubled pawns, which is a potential weakness because they're kind of blocking each other moving forward.
Yeah, Levon played, it started, in the beginning it looked like a Vienna, then it turned into bishop's opening, and then it turned into, I'm not sure what, but Levon is mixing the openings up already. Do you think he wasn't happy with what he'd gotten previously with white, or do you think in general he likes to mix up his openings in these formats?
Well, I think he probably likes playing some different things, but the fact of the matter is he tried the English opening in game 2 with the white pieces, and he lost. So it makes sense trying to switch it up a little bit after a loss, and I'm sure we'll see some changes also from Hikaru in the next game where Hikaru is white, given that he lost the previous one.
Yeah, so maybe no more b4, we shall see. For now, the doubled d-pawns have become just 1 d-pawn. We have a symmetrical pawn structure. The pawn on d5, how do you feel about that's the only white piece or pawn inside the white camp? Do you think it's a strength or a potential weakness?
It's so difficult to say. Probably it's okay, pretty strong for white. But I gotta say, this move, bishop takes knight. It's so rare we give up our bishop unprovoked. But this was actually a fantastic play from Hikaru because he saw that he could follow up with the knight afterwards, and then there's no way for white to save the bishop. So Hikaru is guaranteeing himself that he will be able to eliminate this bishop in the near future. And that's why he made the trade of the strong knight in the center. So that was some really high level strategic stuff from Hikaru. And now we can see Aronian trying to make an escape square for that bishop. I would be shocked if it survives another move. Yes, with Aronian's clear intention of retreating the bishop, Hikaru decides to go for the trade. And Hikaru here will have to focus on getting a draw. He's slightly worse in this position because the white pawn is more aggressive than its black counterpart. But that being said, the black position is so solid. It's so difficult to find any weakness that white can attack. I'm expecting this game to end in a draw.
In general, what advice would you give, let's say, to our viewers if they had to defend this position as black? How should they go on about it? For example, do you want to try and get as many trades as black?
Well, in general, I think I would like to have my pawns working together. So I would like to have one anchor pawn protecting the rest up the board. So here I would probably think like something along the lines of pushing my pawns up so that they're all protected and working together. I think that would be a good strategy. And also you should try to control the only open file on the board. So here there's one file where there are no pawns. And so the rooks just reign free here. And,
John Ludwig, I have to ask you, sorry, I'm so confused by Levon's strategy. I already thought f3, I understood f3 was made to give the bishop a retreating square, but I thought it weakens the dark squares a tiny bit. But especially in combination with h4, do you think Levon is taking some risk here?
I'm not sure he's taking risk. I think he's just he's not playing perfect chess, which is difficult, to be fair, as a human being. So the problem here is that Hikaru annoyingly is trying to create some pressure with his queen, and it's difficult to stop all these intentions Hikaru has. But for now, I think Aronian's position is okay. I think Hikaru is about to create this strategy of the pawns that we were talking about, having the pawns protect each other. And it's still very likely that this ends up in a draw.
Queen d4 is offering a trade of queens. Do we want to take on d4 or not?
Well, the one thing I'm sure about is that we don't want to let white capture our queen to give us the doubled pawns. However, if we capture the white queen, yes, the white pawns will be quite poor afterwards, but it will also open up a possibility for Aronian to make an attack down towards our anchor pawn. Now, we were talking about earlier how important this pawn is because that's the pawn that's going to protect the rest. And so it's a really interesting strategy here from Aronian, giving himself some bad pawns in the middle in order to give the rook this opportunity to put pressure down the board.
And we see that Hikaru has to defend passively, at least for now, rook a7, just covering that pawn on c7. But I guess the king will approach, and maybe the king will take that responsibility of defending the pawn, and then the rook can be reactivated, or what's the plan?
Yeah, I would think so. Hikaru's under some pressure, but it's difficult for Levon to make progress without trading pawns. And in general, trading pawns benefit the side that's trying to defend. So I think it's still fine for Hikaru, and he's also so difficult to break down once he decides to just go for defense.
You know, that reminds me, I saw this video today and I looked it up earlier because I thought at some point I'll put it in the chat. So there you go. It was a tweet from chess.com earlier today where Hikaru was interviewed. You know, it's like these football cards where the players are rated on their attack, defense. And so Hikaru was asked to rate himself out of 100 on attack, defense, tactics, a few more. I thought it's quite a short video. You can watch it in the chat during the break, not now. But Hikaru gave himself the biggest score. He gave himself 99 in defense.
Yeah, and with that in mind, I don't see Levon Aronian breaking through this position. I think Hikaru has organized his pieces quite well, and. For instance, here, Levon is trying to get his rook involved down the e-file, and Hikaru, with the counter threat against the pawn in the center, he's forcing the white bishop to block its own rook, and now Hikaru might try and get his rook into play. If this black rook somehow miraculously makes its way over to the other side, then black could be going for the win. The problem is that there's still these ideas of making the threat down against this anchor pawn. It's a tricky situation, but there's no doubt in my mind that it's Levon Aronian currently trying to win this game.
Yeah, Levon is pressing. He's still trailing by a point. I just realized that we're already 45 minutes into the game. So if I wasn't misleading you off air before we started, I think there will actually be a short break after this game as we approach the halfway, well, as we've just crossed the halfway mark of the 5+1. Levon is trying, but it's still hard to see how he can really make progress.
Yeah, because look at how Hikaru has organized his pieces. Hikaru is literally just moving his king back and forth, telling Levon that, well, there's absolutely no way you can make any progress. And the thing is, like, everything's defended everywhere. There's absolutely no chance of anything happening. The players will be going back and forth right now and accepting a draw in the end.
Yeah, so we're about to see our first draw here. King c3, and I think that was 3 times the position. Hello and welcome back to the 5+1 portion of this SCC quarterfinal between Hikaru and Levon Aronian. Hikaru is playing with the white pieces in this 5th game, and John Ludwig, you were correct. Hikaru is mixing it up as well with the white pieces. No more b3 or b4.
Yeah, a new opening from Hikaru, but I cannot say it has been a big success so far. Levon Aronian has gotten his pieces out quicker than what Hikaru has. Aronian already castling his king with Hikaru's king still stuck in the center. I gotta say, I'm not a big fan of this strategy from Hikaru here in this game. And to me, it just continues the trend that Levon Aronian has actually been more dangerous when he has the black pieces than when he has white. And I don't know if that's because Hikaru is being more aggressive in his white games or willing to take more risks. But at this point, it's too many examples of it happening to be a coincidence.
Mm-hmm. I do see King E2 has just been played by Hikaru. It is a little bit weird that we see, I mean, often the king in the center is a good thing in the endgame, but here there seems to be maybe a few too many pieces on the board still for it to be a pure endgame. I'm not sure, at least, okay, Hikaru has gotten all his pieces out. Do you think the king is on E2 is safe, or do we have to be worried?
Well, I think that's the big discussion right now, because that's really the only difference between the two players' positions. So Hikaru has his king in the middle, claiming that, well, this is an endgame. The queens have been exchanged off, so then it's better to have the king ready to join the action. Whereas Aronian is saying, no. I'm going to try to create an attack against this king, even though the queens have been exchanged off. And basically, this entire game is going to be about who is right in their assessment of the king placement.
Because if we look at the other pieces, I mean, the 4 knights are actually completely symmetrical on d2, d7, f3, f6. The 2 bishops, the bishop on b2, the bishop on b7, those are symmetrical as well. The only difference is the bishop on c4 at first looks more active than the bishop on e7, but knight e8, freeing up that f6 square. Maybe Levon is looking to go bishop f6 and is exchange that beautiful bishop on b2, sorry.
Maybe, but I think that would be a very defensive try. That's the move you want to make if you're happy to go for a draw. I think Aronian might just as well be planning to move this knight up to capture the white bishop, because in fact this white bishop is a key defender of the king. If the bishop was forced to move back, then the black bishop would come in through this side of the board, the a6 square, and the bishop could create an attack towards the king in that fashion. So if Levon wants a draw, he will now move his bishop forward to try and make a trade. If he's going for a win, he's going to put his knight here. He's going to attack the white bishop that's forced to retreat. Now Levon Aronian trying to move his pawn up. He's trying to create a double attack with his pawn attacking both the white bishop and the white knight at the same time. This just got spicy.
Absolutely, Levon not happy with just going for a draw here. By the way, chat, I saw a few of you were getting concerned that the evil VAR might not be working. Don't worry, it's just it seems there were a couple of moments here where the engine just evaluates it at 0-0, but the bar is working. Don't worry. Hikaru is taking his time. He's the one who's down half a minute here, and he is thinking how to stop this plan, or at least how to prepare to meet the plan that Levon is going for with e5, e4. I'm thinking out loud, is knight d2 and e4 something I ever want to do, to just brutally...
Well, the problem is...
Maybe the other knight, but...
so if you move this knight, you lose one pawn. Yeah. And if you move the other knight back, well, this guy just moved forward 2 moves ago. So that would be a huge concession to move this knight back and forth. And Hikaru is not about that. He moves his knight forward in the middle, going after this black pawn, trying simply to capture it with the knight. And this is a very tricky move. Now, in order to defend, Levon probably needs to go king to f7. But having taken a little peek at the computer evaluation, king f7 is not even mentioned among the top 3 choices. Instead, the engine wants to go with the knight to e5, ignoring the threat on black's pawn, and instead starting a threat on this white bishop. And we talked about this bishop earlier. That's the bishop that's responsible for defending white's king. So I don't think Levon is going to play this move. Wow, he did actually play it. I was wrong. And look, Hikaru was expecting it.
And the king is on d3. The first thing we have to look for, are there any discover check with the knight on d6? Thankfully, it looks like there is nothing crushing. But what a crazy position. In general, John Ludwig, I get very sad when queens come off, but here, no queens, but so much life in this position.
Yeah, an incredible play from Aronian, making that pawn sacrifice, appreciating the danger White's king currently faces. And like we said in the opening, this game is going to be all about whether or not it was a good idea for Hikaru to keep his king in the middle of the board. And right now it's looking like, well, no. It's looking like that probably wasn't such a good idea. Because that king is being chased around, and look at here, the black bishop also joining this attack. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, Hikaru is up a pawn, so if he manages to keep his king safe, he can win the endgame with the extra pawn. This is such a tense position right now, and both players are gonna get low on time.
Absolutely. King f7 now by Aronian, saying, get that white knight out from inside my camp. The knight has no choice but to retreat. It goes to f4. And I'm curious to see, how is Hikaru going to try and get the pieces out? The rook from a1 hasn't moved at all so far in this game. I'm sure Hikaru would be delighted to exchange some pieces here. As John Ludwig pointed out, he is up a pawn. In general, when you're up material, you are happy to trade. I think that's very much the case here. So I'm looking for how can I make it happen, but it's not so easy to force some trades.
Yeah, maybe knight back, try and attack this black knight. Okay, Hikaru pushes forward. I'm guessing Hikaru wants to force back this black bishop on the side of the board. Seems sensible to me, but he spent a lot of time on the decision. Now it's Aronian's turn, and both, this is going to be another time scramble. And so far, Hikaru has been just supreme in the time scrambles. He's won plenty of difficult positions while being low on time so far.
Absolutely. I'm looking, it's a position that's so difficult to play for both sides. One thing I'm noticing is this square on d3. I think very often when there's a knight on the board and the king and the rook are in that constellation, you just eye up those squares as some potential ideas of getting the knight to e5.
Yeah, I'm liking this knight e5 move. I think that would have been a good idea. Aronian instead choosing to retreat. So Aronian is eyeing this pawn on g2. He's planning to attack this knight and then capture the pawn. Hikaru then realizes that the king should be used to defend the pawn. Both players now down to just, 20 seconds for Aronian, 40 seconds for Hikaru. And the position is still just tremendously tense.
Absolutely. But I feel it's a good development for Hikaru, because for the first time in this game, I feel the king is actually safe on f1. Now we see bishop e2 just opening up from the white side, that c file. If Hikaru can, he'd love to trade at least one pair of rooks. Levon says, no thank you, that knight is staying put on c4 for now. And the king finally has made its way to g1.
And look at the time management from Aronian. I'm not approving of this time management. Aronian down to just 3 seconds on the clock right now. It's still a very, very tense position. Ooh, the knight coming in, making threats against the white pieces. The king has evacuated, but Aronian has tremendously active pieces in return for being down a pawn.
He does, but Hikaru has two knights. We talked about how tricky knights are. Levon is facing those knights. He also has 2 seconds on the clock. I don't think he's going to survive this.
No, there's just no chance dealing with these knights. Hikaru now jumping up with the knight, being able to capture this bishop. Then he's going to put pressure on this remaining pawn. Ooh, he should have put pressure because now he lost control of this whole situation. Aronian suddenly realizing there's a chance he could survive this. Aronian suddenly up a pawn. That was a not very good play by Hikaru in the time scramble. However, that pawn has now been captured. Now Hikaru is back in the driving seat with players being alone, and now Hikaru can win the pawn endgame. Wow.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, no, it's just so impossible to play perfect chess when you're low on time. This loss was solely due to Aronian's time management. He cannot allow himself to get lower than 10 seconds against such a good, tricky player like Hikaru. There was a moment there where I thought Hikaru had spoiled his chances.
Let's just flip the board and then I'll let you.
Yeah, sorry.
On the right-hand
I
side.
should follow Hikaru.
The right. Oh, yeah, maybe that works as well.
No, that didn't work.
Oh, on the right hand, under the time stamps. Yeah, perfect.
But yeah, no, that was just an amazing game. And here going into this game, Hikaru going for a unusual opening, which the computer hates on Black's behalf.
Can we just rewind a few moves to see how we got here?
So this is the Frankenstein Dracula variation.
Nice name.
We have some amazing names for chess openings. And Hikaru played a move here that's considered very risky, grabbing a pawn in the center, and with the white queen then joining the fray, there's just a tremendous amount of pressure on Black. Hikaru tried to chase the queen, but the queen came in, capturing a pawn. Check on the king. Hikaru offering the trade of queens, and now landing himself in a really troublesome spot, because right now Hikaru is struggling to get his bishop into the game because this knight is blocking the bishop's entry. In order to get the bishop into the game, the pawn needs to move forward, but the knight is standing where the pawn wants to go. And look at this play from Aronian. Aronian now really feeling confident with the outcome of this opening. Aronian playing quickly, which we haven't seen thus far, and also sacrificing a pawn, just trying to get all his pieces into play while these black pieces are stuck on the back ranks.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking of the time situation, I'm really perplexed by what Hikaru has done here. To take the pawn on e4, which is incredibly risky by nature when you go grab pawns early in the opening. In general, you have to be pretty sure that you know your lines, because you can get in trouble so fast. So I'm very surprised to see Hikaru take the pawn and then spend quite a lot of time. Okay, the game is moving so fast. So Hikaru has given back the pawn. He's finally going to get out his bishop, or maybe not, because that pawn on d7 is going to be a long-term weakness here.
Yeah, big problem for Hikaru here. This pawn is going to be a problematic piece for a long time. However, that trade of rooks from Levon Aronian may have simplified Black's task somewhat. The king is now able to chase away that white rook, which is a big accomplishment for Hikaru, but he's not out of the woods just yet. This black bishop is currently pointing into nothing at all. And basically all of white's pieces are located on the dark squares, which means it's going to be impossible for this bishop to put pressure on white. So still definitely Aronian having a good position here. But at least Hikaru is getting the pieces into play. Wow, controversial decision here from Hikaru, going for the trade of rooks. This means that now there are no more black pieces that can control any of these dark squares. And Hikaru's defensive strategy here relies solely on the bishop being able to keep control of important light squares and thereby stunting Aronian's progress. Really interesting game, this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised. This is something I would never do in a million years, because I hate this playing bishop against knight, and the knight will jump around forever. Maybe I'll hold. Most likely, I'll lose. Of course, Hikaru is about a million times better at defending than I am. Also, looking at the camera makes me think that Hikaru is not too concerned. I mean, he looks quite confident. To me, I thought Hikaru was actually going to try and exchange the bishop for the knight, which Levon would not oblige to. Here, g5 has just been played. I guess g5 is just trying to make it a bit easier, a bit harder for white to start pushing the pawns.
Yeah, in general, when you have a bishop controlling the light squares, you want to have your pawns who are also like who capture to the side.
Yeah.
Diagonal pieces, if you will. You want to have them on the opposite color of your bishop so that they're working together beautifully. Hikaru here will have to face a threat to the bishop, and I'm assuming he's going to move the bishop down. No.
Yeah, bishop b1 is a curious choice. Is the idea maybe to keep the king out? Say to the king, you should not pass via d3, you should not pass via e4, and just stay on that diagonal for now.
Yeah.
He's bringing the king. The bishop will have to move again. Will it move back to g6? It does.
Yeah, so the big question here is whether or not Levon Aronian is able to put his king on this d4 square and push that king slowly but surely further up the board. And
I'm just wondering if c4 is something we want to do, or if we want to prepare these kind of pawn pushes. c4 is a move that I would be very tempted to play if I get the chance.
Yeah, but right now, if c4, then the king finds a good spot on e5. So Aronian is very clever here. He first plays this f4 move, trying to challenge the black pawn, and now when Hikaru defends, then you go c4, because now the black king is forced back, and when the king is forced back, the white king can move forward. This has been excellent play in the endgame so far from Levon Aronian, and if Hikaru wants to earn that 99 defensive skill he judged himself on, he's gonna have to save this really tricky game, because this is not easy at all, with white making incremental progress.
Absolutely. Levon is also up a minute on the clock for now. h6, of course, makes sense, just protecting the pawn. On g5, you never want as black to capture on e4, and thus creating two weak pawns, allowing the white king in. So h6 was, I think, really the only move that made sense. And, well, here is the knight just jumping around for now, hitting the bishop again, asking where is it going to go to. It will not be a fun defensive task, although just as I say that, the evil bar has again jumped to 0-0s. And I wonder what is the plan for black? Shall we just sit and defend passively, or do we want at some point to maybe go b5, a5? How do you feel about those?
Well, I think you have to go a5, but Hikaru's waiting for Aronian to first play c4. And basically what you want to have happen is create an entry for the black king. So like something like here, a5, and then trying to get the black king up towards the queen side. I feel like Levon Aronian missed an opportunity earlier in this endgame where he could have pushed this pawn forward to c4 and then gotten his king into the middle. Because right now, even though the knight is really well placed, the knight is kind of blocking the white's king from getting further up the board.
I'm trying to understand what the problem is if we move the knight backwards as white. Okay, well, maybe I'll find out, because Levon has just played knight e2. The knight gets hit. Maybe does the knight not really have any... What if I go back to c1? What are you gonna do?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think
Hikaru
would then trade and start running his king. So right now, this knight is doing an important job of preventing the black king from suddenly running up on the left side. But that means Levon is unable to get his king to be standing here in the middle. And wow, what a play from Hikaru. Hikaru is now going for the win.
Incredible. A4, creating a passed pawn on the A file. I would be very afraid that that pawn is just going to drop. It's certainly a very double-edged decision, because you can win, but if you lose the pawn, then you're suddenly just lost. I guess the point is it's not easy for white to go in and grab that A-pawn.
Yeah, and I still don't like that from Hikaru. It's not the decision of a man who's up by 2 points in this match, because making this advance increases your chance of losing by so much. And right now the computer is saying there's a brilliant combination for Aronian, where you can first sacrifice one pawn and then run the other pawn down the board to try and get a new queen. But that opportunity is missed as both players are running low on time. The question now is, Hikaru gonna make a win out of this fantastic defensive display, or is it gonna end in a draw, or is he gonna lose? Wow, Levon has captured a really important pawn on d7, and right now Hikaru is actually down 2 pawns. And look at this, those 2 pawns are quite dangerous. They both have access to go further down, and well, yeah, the pawn is just promoting. You cannot stop 2 pawns with 1 bishop, and Levon Aronian, just as we thought he was kind of messing up this very favorable endgame, he goes ahead and takes down the win. And that was really impressive, because it showcased that even though Hikaru is this speed chess demon, when he gets low on time, when Hikaru is down to just 20 seconds on the clock, he also is prone to making mistakes and losing tricky positions. And it just goes to show that the main asset Hikaru has in these time scrambles is his ability to just not get low on time, rather than being necessarily so much better when you are low on time, because he's so fast for the rest of the game. He doesn't have to be as concerned about being low on time as for instance Aronian.
Yeah, and I think Hikaru will not be happy with his play so far. Even in the game, some of the games he won, he was suffering a bit. In general, I think Hikaru is someone who's very hard on himself. I mean, his previous match against David Paravian, he won with a huge score still. He was not happy. And yeah, here he still has a 1 point lead. But I don't know what exactly it is that he has to change. I don't know if it's something to do with the openings. We see he has once again switched up the openings. What do you feel should change?
Well, I mean, he's leading the match, so things are not that problematic. No. And here he actually chose to go for the same opening he did in the previous game. He had the white pieces, which in some ways I think is a good sign, because it means that he was happy with the complications that arose in that previous game. And now look at this, he's going after this juicy c6 square. It's a really complicated position where all the pieces are still on the board, and these white knights are working together to try and infiltrate to the c6 square, and that's going to be an amazing outpost for the knights. And so I'm really liking what Hikaru has done thus far in this one.
Yeah, and it feels like we don't even need to lose a temper on recapturing on c4 here immediately. I really like your move 95, as does Hikaru. He's just played the pawn on c4. Will never really go anywhere. We currently have 3 pieces looking at that pawn, the rook, the bishop, and the knight. And I'm very curious to see how Levon is going to cover that c6 square, because right now I'm not seeing it. I'm wondering, could black even maybe at some point consider giving up the exchange for that knight? Because it just looks like that knight will be one hell of an annoying piece.
Yeah, no, it's a great position for Hikaru. Tremendous strategy here, securing that square for the knight. And I think he's going to win this. And I think also we see on the time management of the players, we can kind of see, oh yeah, Hikaru is really liking his position. He's really liking his strategy so far here, because he's way up on time. He's playing his moves confidently. And now he managed to establish his knight in the heart of Black's position. Really, really good play here by Hikaru. I think he's going to win this. And that's a big statement from him, because I think I do agree with you, Fiona, that Hikaru cannot be happy with his play thus far. But the major problem has been Hikaru landing himself in trouble when he has the white pieces. And right now he's demonstrating that he's not gonna allow this trend in the match of Aronian having good games with the black pieces. Now he's just taking charge from the get-go. I'm just really liking his play. I am curious though why he's spending so much time here. If I was Hikaru, I would probably have captured this pawn in the center like several minutes ago, because then we also get the threat on Black's knight. But there must be a problem, because Hikaru has spent over 1 minute pondering this decision.
It always makes me wonder, is there something completely out of the box we're not thinking of? Is there a clever intermediate move? But it's hard to think
Maybe
of something.
Like bishop a3, pointing down on this guy? Oh, he captures with the rook. Do you think he wants to go after the king?
I hope so. We haven't seen, it's one of the things we haven't seen yet in this match, just a full out kingside attack. So I would be very, get very excited if we saw this.
Yeah, he might be preparing a sacrifice.
Yeah, why else would he take with the rook? There's literally no other reason I can think of.
So we might, and considering all the time he spent, 1 minute and 40 seconds he spent on that decision to capture with a rook. Do you think he's actually going to sacrifice this knight now? Is he just going to move the rook over to point down on the king? It feels like it's a bit too much. But on the other hand, if he moves this knight that's currently under attack, then he will lose the protection of the other one.
And maybe is that something he was thinking about? But did bishop takes stop this line because we had the capture on d5?
I thought so. I thought if I take with the bishop, I start capturing more stuff as the line progresses. Ooh, and he is going for the sacrifice. Oh my gosh. And actually, this bishop is now pointing in towards a pawn that is defended. That pawn is defended by a black knight, which means that if Levon Aronian now captures the knight in the center, Hikaru will then have to sacrifice his rook as well. This is not just a knight sacrifice. This is a full rook sacrifice from Hikaru. The computer hates it. It has cost him more than 2.5 minutes on the clock. But as a spectator, I'm loving it.
I have to say, the computer, I thought, doesn't hate it. I thought if the computer really hated it, it would jump a lot more. It doesn't like it, that's for sure. But giving up so much material and the evaluation only being, let's say, minus around 1, the -1 mark, it's not that bad. Usually if I sacrifice
look at this move.
This move.
Look at this move. This, according to the computer engines, this was the only move for Levon Aronian not to end up in a horrible position. This is a move that Hikaru missed when he was making his sacrifice. And the idea is that if this knight is recaptured, then the black bishop will come up, put the pressure on that pawn, and actually manage to get some counterplay. And that's why Hikaru decided to take the bishop instead. And now there are two white rooks under attack at the same time, in addition to a queen and a bishop. And also the black bishop is pointing up against the white king. How does Hikaru address all these problems? He just goes for a counterattack. He completely ignores all the threats to his own pieces and instead starts countering. And this move is incredible. Because
Queen
now,
D6. I mean, all those pieces under attack, and he didn't move any of them.
And Aronian ends up not defending any as well. Aronian here prioritizing trying to make a queen trade. This knight is still under attack. This rook is still under attack. What a game this has been.
Bishop e6. Okay, there goes. At least something has been captured. King h8, but still, I mean, the standoff between all the pieces, how the players navigate this with under a minute is incredible. And look at this, the smoke has cleared. We're into an endgame where Hikaru is still down an exchange, but he has a bishop, and let me quickly do a pawn count, a bishop and nothing. So a bishop for rook, but the bishops do look very, very nice. They are looking at the weakness on a5. They are looking at the king. I think this is a game where actually all three results are still very much possible.
Absolutely, especially considering the time situation. Both players down to just 30 seconds, and we've seen some wild scrambles so far in this match. And I think this is going to be decided on just who's better with a low time yet again.
Yeah, and looking at the players, I feel like, the tension is rising. Let's not forget that if Levon wins this game, he ties the match for the first time. Hikaru, for now, just dropping the bishop back. He's still looking at the 2 pawns on a5, on e5. King h7, what a move. Just saying, take your pick. And Hikaru says, no, I don't want any of your pawns. John Ludwig, what's going on here?
I don't understand any of this, but it's very fascinating. And I do think Hikaru's going to win. I do think Hikaru's going to win because Levon is down to just 4 seconds on the clock, and there's multiple pawns. Look at these bishops. The bishops are just amazing working together. These bishops can try to help the pawn go down and become a new queen. Aronian with just 4 seconds left, I cannot imagine he somehow manages to survive. Look at this pressure as well. Hikaru attacking on both fronts, getting his rook back into a defensive position afterwards, now taking the rook and the checkmate to end the game. A master class in how to deal with time scramble, and also a master class in tricky captures and tactics. And wow, this was just the game of the match thus far. The tactics were incredible. Hikaru initiated it when he sacrificed not just his knight in the middle, he also gave up the rook right afterwards. And for a very long time, Aronian really managed to find all the necessary defensive moves. But as is always often the case in such situations, so long as you manage to put enough pressure on the opponent, he's gonna crack at some point. And Aronian did crack, and Hikaru, I would say, deservedly with a 4.5 to 2.5 lead.
I mean, I'm still processing what we just saw. I think this is a game, it would take quite a while to analyze it. Probably at least an hour to understand what was going on there in the complications. But with that win, Hikaru takes a 2-point lead again. I'm not sure if the players seem to be talking to someone. I think they're talking to probably to the production team from chess.com. Hikaru is not happy with something, it seems. I'm not sure what's going on, but they have liftoff. This very likely, John Ludwig, will be the last game of this 5+1 portion, as just under 7.5 minutes remain on the clock. Time. Remember, maybe just one word about the rules for anyone who hasn't seen the SCC format before. As long as there's any time left on the match clock, the next game will start. So even if there's just 1 or 2 seconds, when they finish, the next game starts and counts towards the match. But I think very likely all the games we've seen have been so thought out, so long. So I expect this one to go over 7 minutes.
And here Hikaru with the black pieces, choosing one of his favorite openings, the Queen's Gambit Decline. Now this was all the rage in the early 1900s, but Hikaru has been one of the main players to bring it back into the limelight. And here with his pawn, he's putting pressure in towards the middle of the board. And now comes a big decision. Hikaru has the option of just rushing with his pawns forward on the queen side. And he does choose to go for that plan. Aronian, down by 2 points in the match, probably welcomes this aggression from Hikaru, because now the game enters a phase where Black is trying to rush with the pawns on the right-hand side. White is pushing the pawns forward in the center. This is going to be tremendously complicated, which is normally something I would say is advantageous for Hikaru. But given the match situation, and given the fact that Aronian is also a very creative and aggressive player, I think this suits Aronian very well to get a big fight with difficult decisions for both players.
Yeah, so we see that the knights have just come off. I was trying to make sense of the evaluation which I'm seeing, which is giving Hikaru a little advantage. It feels like White's bishops for now are more active. The bishop on c2 pointing down at h7. Maybe a problem is again the black bishop on f4 that's on the same color complex as the central pawns on e5 and e4. And I guess the biggest problem maybe is just those pawns that Hikaru keeps pushing on the queen side.
These pawns are potential monsters. But what Aronian is trying to achieve here is just blockading those pawns. So Aronian now trying to provoke Hikaru into pushing the pawn further forward, because then there's a white bishop blocking the pawn thereafter. Hikaru decides to move his bishop out instead. I'm expecting Aronian to move the rook into the center, and he does. And to be honest, I'm not convinced by the computer in this situation. The computer wants Hikaru to push forward, but to me that felt like a mistake. But I also want to say it was a mistake by Levon Aronian to make the trade, allowing Hikaru's rook to get into this really promising position, controlling the board here from this c3 square. And now Hikaru is about to use his rook to chase the queen. And when the queen is chased back, then the pawns will continue progressing down the board. I'm not sure this is the final game of this 5-minute portion. And the reason I'm not sure is because Hikaru suddenly just, he found a just higher level than what he showed. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like this.
And right now, he's just putting the pressure.
I really like this last move. Queen a8, defending the pawn on a5, but as you said, opening up, actually defending both pawns and opening up the back rank for the rook to join the game. We see that Queen a8 sent Levon into the tank. He now plays Bishop d2. I see the engine does not like this move one bit. I'm not sure yet that I see why it's quite so bad.
Yeah, it's about a sacrifice here for Hikaru Nakamura. He's going to have to think about this for a little bit. But these pawns, we talked about how strong they could be, and this is their time to shine. Of course, Hikaru finds the right move. He sacrifices his rook in exchange for the bishop, but now there's a double threat. White's bishop is under attack, as is White's pawn. The bishop has to save itself, but now there are two black pawns so close to becoming new queens on this queen side, and Hikaru is going to win this game because in the long run, there's nothing Levon can do to stop these pawns from marching all the way down, becoming new queens. Here, the move bishop a3 is excellent for Hikaru. He wants to trade off this white bishop. This bishop is the only thing holding White's position together, making sure that the black pawns cannot progress. But it will. They will. We just need to be patient.
Incredible game by Hikaru. I mean, this was such one-way traffic. I don't even know. It all happened so fast, you know. Suddenly the pawns were rolling. The exchange was sacrificed. Here we go. Bishop a3 is on the board. Let's talk very quickly about match strategy. Do you think with a minute 30, just under 30 remaining on the clock time, do you think Levon should try and resign and get another 5+1 game? Or do you think he should, you know, just wait for a break and then go into the 3+1?
Ooh, that's a very tricky decision to make. I guess the conventional wisdom is that Hikaru is better the less time there is on the clock. But at the same time, I think that break would do Aronian some good. I think having an additional game in 5-minute chess is not going to help you when Hikaru is playing as well as he is right now. Remember, both the last two games from Hikaru has been absolute masterpieces. So I don't see why you would want to give him an additional game when that's the trend in the match. I think Aronian now just needs to get a break and readjust to this new gear, like you said, that Hikaru has shown.
Absolutely, and the timer is down to 10 seconds. I think it's safe to say this will be the final game now. Let's talk, after talking match strategy, let's talk conversion. Those pawns are very close to queening, but how do we actually get them there? What is the way to win this game?
Well, now there's a nice trick for Hikaru, promoting one pawn in order to lure the bishop back so that the other pawn can trap it. Oh, I really thought Hikaru was gonna utilize that very nice trick. The computer actually felt that Hikaru's move of just protecting was even better than that trick I mentioned. Essentially, the computer is just saying that in the long run, these pawns will be decisive. If I'm Hikaru now, I want to get my queen over to the other side as quickly as possible. I think it would be very important for Hikaru to get rid of this white pawn that has established itself uncomfortably close to the black king. So I think Hikaru's strategy here is move this bishop up so that all these pieces are protecting each other, and then try and get the queen over to the other side.
And it's really such a sad position to play for Levon, who understands he is lost. But when you're lost, what do you want? You want to be able to at least create some counterplay, create some chaos. But here it's just, I mean, Hikaru's pieces are covering the whole board. I don't see a single entry point. It's just suffering for Levon, who basically just has to wait for Hikaru to make progress.
Yeah, so Hikaru now going to move his bishop up. I don't like Hikaru's time usage here. I don't understand why he's spending so much time, and now that's going to be a problem for him. He's down to just 22 seconds. He has a fantastic position, but this time usage is not inspiring confidence, in my opinion. Levon Aronian trying to make threats on this black position, attacking the bishop. The bishop now creating that defensive structure with the pawn defending the bishop, bishop defending pawn, and pawn defending pawn. All of these pieces are now taking care of each other. And Hikaru needs to get rid of this last remaining pawn on the side of the board.
Engine did not like rook e7 whatsoever. I don't know what the problem was, but things are getting really, really dangerous now.
Yeah, because he's down to just 10 seconds.
Yeah.
It's impossible to defend accurately with just 10 seconds left. However, there is a big threat in the position now with the pawn coming down to become a new queen. The issue is this white pawn on the side of the board. This pawn is creating threats close to the black king, which is what is making Hikaru's life so difficult. The engine is saying rook c7. Yes, that's... Oh, and now rook b7 is a winning move for Aronian. What a tremendous effort by Aronian to stay in the game.
But he misses rook b7.
Doesn't find this opportunity, but Hikaru, just having 10 seconds, is not able to defend accurately. We talked about this. Even when you're Hikaru Nakamura, when you get down to just 10 or fewer seconds on the clock, you're not going to be able to defend 100% accurately. But wow, big moment. Yeah, Hikaru managed to get rid of this very annoying white pawn on the side of the board. That is huge for Hikaru. However, the danger is not over just yet. There is a white queen and rook pointing in towards that black king still. Hikaru sacrifices his bishop in order to make checks with his queen. Hikaru now going for a draw. Hikaru is going to try to use his queen to keep giving checks on this white king. Wow, Aronian tries to run away. He tries to run his king over, and apparently he's successful. The computer now saying that Aronian has succeeded in tricking Hikaru, but it's not over just yet, because Hikaru still has these pawns trying to become new queens, and the white pawn has been eliminated. Hikaru has 5 pawns in exchange for a rook. This is incredible stuff. I think Hikaru's gonna win it. Look at the eval bar. Hikaru and his pawns are gonna win against the rook, because a pawn can be worth more than a rook because they can become new queens. And look at this move from Hikaru. Amazing play. White could have captured the bishop, but
wow. My god.
And Hikaru ends up winning the game because it's just too difficult to keep track of all these pawns trying to become new queens. What a game. To be honest, Hikaru deserved the win in this one. His strategy early on in the game was just supreme. However, I also have to give kudos to Aronian, who came so close to not only surviving a difficult situation, Aronian was so close to actually turning it around and winning, which would have kept the Hikaru's lead down to a single point. Now, however, with the 5-minute portion ending, Hikaru has a commanding 3-point lead thanks to this incredible scramble.
I mean, what did we just witness? This game. I mean, we thought some of the previous games were complete insanity, but I think this one just takes the cake. I see the chat is going wild. I see GM John Ludwig Hammer is in the chat. What a play indeed. I hope it continues like that. I mean, actually, Levon, we can see the camera on Levon, who hasn't moved. The players are on break. Hikaru has left. Levon looks completely disheartened, and I think this one, you know, after he managed to come back from a dead lost position, then it was a perpetual somehow. Then he managed to escape the checks, and then to lose the endgame after all. I mean, it's a heartbreaker for Levon, who's now trailing by 3 points. But we are also going to go on a quick break, and then we'll be back in a few minutes with the 3+1 portion. I don't know if the players will be able to keep up that level of entertainment, but we will find out. Don't go anywhere. As Hikaru is in the chat, pawns, not love. Well, the pawns were certainly showing something here. Good luck, Hikaru, and we'll see you guys in just a few.